All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott from Jeff Teaches Programming. And in the last video, we went over our PayrollDbContextFactory.cs proj file. We went over the App.Config file. We went over the PayrollDbContext file. And we went over the PayrollDbContextFactory file. All right, that's in C172 that you see right there. So what I'd like to do now is to go over the stuff that was in the models folder. So let me bring this up. So let's bring up from the models folder. So we've gone through data right now. I've gone through here and tried. If you look in here, yes, there's still some warnings, but they're all in BMI files. We're not working with BMI anymore, so I'm not going to touch any of those. All right. Need that. So let's go under models and let's start with the one you'd think we'd start with, which is employee. All right. So what do we have in here? Well, this is our employee. This will define our employee table. I remove the migrations folder, and I'm going to remove the database and try to recreate it in just a bit. Again, this is an abstract class for every employee type we have in the application. As you can see, what do we have in here? Well, we have the data and the behavior common to all employee types. In other words, we've got the ID, which is our primary key. All right, we've got the first name, we've got the last name, we've got the gross pay, which we're going to calculate. All right, and that's by calling calculate gross pay. Okay, and we've got this calculate gross pay. Now, as we look in here, again, this is an abstract class. You can look at it as representing a generic payroll employee. You cannot instantiate it because it's abstract. So we're going to have to create one of the four concrete subclasses, either hourly employee, PieceWorkerEmployee, CommissionEmployee, or SalariedEmployee. All right. So we've got the primary key. Again, that'll be auto-generated by SQL Server. It's an identity column. EFCore will set this property after we do an insert. Then we've got the first name, which you can see is initialized to the empty string. The last name, which is initialized to the empty string. Then, next, we've got this computed property in here. All right, why is this important? Because this is the gross pay. All right. So the reason that this is important is because every employee needs to have his or her gross pay calculated. All right. So I'm looking in here and I'm looking at my stuff, and I've got, hold on a sec. We've got this calculate gross pay, okay, and this is going to be the gross pay, and this is going to be that every class that implements our employee, that being hourly employee, pieceworker employee, salaried employee, and commission employee, every one of those will have to come up with their own calculate gross pay method, which is exactly what we would want to have happen. All right, and hopefully, at least hopefully, that makes sense to everybody. All right. Okay, as we go on then, the next thing to come on and look at in here is the hourly employee. All right, so we're going to look at that in just a second. All right. So this gross pay that you see right here, this gross pay will be calculated. You can look at it, basically as we need it on the fly, whatever, by calling the calculate gross pay. All right, and again, this right here is an abstract method. So every subclass must implement this. It'll calculate and return the gross pay for that particular employee type based on that employee type. All right, so that's the first one. Next, let's go over salaried employee. Hourly employee. This is kind of the order in which I've been doing these. So I did hourly, then I did piece worker, then I did commission, then I did salary. So that's what we're going to do here. All right. So this right here, as you know, or as you can guess, whatever, this represents an employee that's paid hourly, and they do get overtime if they work more than 40 hours. So max non-OT is 40, so 40 is the most hours they can work without getting overtime, and the overtime rate is 1.5, meaning it's time and a half. All right. Okay. Now, this is just a parameterless constructor. All right. So again, we've got public decimal, hours worked, and public decimal over hourly rate. All right. So the hours worked during a pay period, we talked about this before, between 0 and 84, and the pay is between 0 and 99.99. As I'd already mentioned, these are arbitrary values that I came up with, which would be able to be changed if indeed that was what you wanted to do. Our calculate gross pay function that we'll go over next, that'll return the gross pay, meaning, as you can see, if the hours that you worked were less than or equal to 40, it's just going to return gross pay as hours worked times hourly rate. However, if you worked overtime, this will handle your first 40 hours, and this will take any hours over 40 times your hourly rate times 1.5. All right, so there's nothing that has to be changed in there that I can see. It all looks all right to me. So next, let's just make sure we'll do a file, save all here. All right, and I'm going to close this one. And I'll leave employee open at least for now. And let's go to piece worker. All right, for our piece worker employee, again, nothing really new here. It's an employee that's paid per unit of output. In other words, it's the number of pieces that they make times the price for each piece. All right, again, you can see at the top, we have a empty constructor, and then we've got the properties of this table. We've got an integer now for pieces made, because it's the number of pieces you make. They're whole units or whole pieces, so it's got to be an int. Then we've got the price for each piece in dollars. Then the gross pay for this is just the product of pieces made times price per piece. That's it. Nothing new that we have to put in there. All right. So let's go on. Again, I'm just going to keep doing a file save all, even if I'm not changing anything. Let's go up to commission employees. Again, nothing new, nothing surprising in here. It's an employee who's paid by the amount of sales they have times whatever the percentage is for their commission. All right. All of these, be it an hourly employee, a piece worker employee, a commission employee, or a salaried employee, they all inherit first name and last name from employee. But as you can see in here, as an example, the sales amount and the sales percentage, both of which are decimals and both of which are under the constructor, they're both of type decimal. And then for the calculate gross pay, you're just multiplying one by the other. Now, we don't have to do this, but again, I'm trying to be a little consistent here. So let's just put here constructor. Okay, so File, Save All, and I don't think I put that into PieceWorker, so I'm going to right now. And I think it was already in our hourly worker. Yes, it was. All right, finally, we've got our salaried employee. Now, again, all of these, as you can see, inherit from employee. That's how they get the ID and the first name and the last name. All right, so what we're putting underneath here, after the constructor for each one of these, is we're putting down the fields that are unique to this type of employee. For here, it's just a decimal of the salary, and we're just returning that. That's it. So let's take a look. That's all of these, so let's close all of these. So let's do a File, Save All, and I'm going to close hourly employees, piece worker employees, commission employees, salaried employees. We'll leave the regular employee up for now, just in case. Okay, and let's go. So that's everything in models. So right now we've gone over everything in data. We've gone over everything in models. We've gone over App.Config. All right, and now we're going to go over services, which is our employee service. All right. Now, this employee service, this implements what's referred to as a service layer, so it's going to allow us to do all of the CRUD operations. I believe I mentioned this before, but a service layer sits between the form and EFCore. It keeps the database logic out of the form code. The form is going to call, add, update, delete, etc. All those factory methods, but they never touch the DB context completely. All right, so what do we see in here? I've got this get all employees. We don't really need that. Let's remove that. All right, so the first thing that you see in here is we're creating a variable. And this variable says private read-only PayrollDbContext_context. This is the EFCore database context. It's read-only, so you cannot replace it after we have created the service. All right? Then, what do we have here? Well, we have, since we've been putting that comment in there, we can put it here right now. Doesn't really matter whether we do or not, but this is the constructor. All right? Now we've got in here context equal. You can see all that good stuff that's in here. All right. What we want to be able to do is to construct a service with what's referred to as an injected database context. All right. And if it can't do that, throw an exception and let us know that there's a problem here. All right. Then after that come our CRUD operations. So the first one here that you see is list. All right. So this is list, which really is our read operation. All right. Now we have in here get all employees. This is going to query, all right, each of the 4 concrete tables. When I say concrete, I mean hourly employee, piece worker employee, commission employee, and salaried employee separately. And then it'll merge them together in memory. All right. So again, this will load all the employees. And it'll put them into a single list. All right. Now we have this as no tracking in here, okay? And if you don't put that in there, EFCore does a snapshot for each object. We're only reading here, so we don't need that. It wouldn't hurt to put it in if I want to be real picky here from the way I have been doing these things. I can line all this stuff up. But again, we're just grabbing each type of employee. All right. So first we're saying to load every hourly employee from the hourly employees table, then load every piece worker employee from the piece worker employee table, then load every commission employee from the commission employee table, and then load every salary employee from the salary employee table. Then what happens is it's going to combine all of these into one list. Okay? And we've got this add range. And what that add range is going to do is it's going to append each one of the lists, okay, each sublist at one time. Next, we come in here and we do a sort. This is going to sort based on primary key. Okay? It's ordinal. It'll ignore case. So if we do put something in here, okay, if we do put something in here in upper, lower, or mixed case, and it's not always the same, it'll be all right. All right, it'll still do the sort. Then it returns all of them. All right, next, this is our add operation. I want to be consistent here with the way I put in my comments. So that was the list or read operation. This is the add operation. All right. So this will allow us to create or insert a new record. In fact, I shouldn't even say add operation, because since we're doing CRUD, it's really create. Or, well, let's do it like that. We'll do it the same way we did the other one. Add or create operation. Okay? All right. This will insert an employee into the correct table based on its type. Okay, and we'll have to make sure if for some reason it's null, we just throw in an exception. All right, I cut this thing down. I made so many changes to this, but this just basically says if for some reason you have an employee type that's not recognized, throw an exception. All right, next, we come in here with this switch statement. We want to make sure that the correct DB set in here is used. So we've got a type pattern switch. Hourly employee, which we're referring to as H. Piece worker employee, which we're referring to as P. Commission employee, which we're referring to as C. And salaried employee, which we're referring to as S. All right. So if it's the first one, this says inserted into the hourly employees table. This says inserted into the piece worker employees table, insert into the commission employees table, or insert into the salaries table employee. And if there was any kind of problem, just throw an exception. Finally, we've got this save changes. Basically, that'll write all those changes to the database at one time. Next, we've got update. So this is our change, or really our update operation. All right, our third of our 4 CRUD operations. we have to make sure here we are persisting our changes to the record. So this should save the changes to an existing employee back to the database. All right, because those records were loaded with as no tracking, this method must reattach the object, and then when it's done, mark it as being modified. All right, again, we're going to come in here, and if for some reason we haven't set up an employee type, we're just throwing an exception. Those shouldn't happen. All right. So we set the state to be modified and attach the detached entry to the context and mark every column as changed. In other words, we're letting the system know. Previously, you'd come in here and said, hey, don't worry about this. Well, you do have to worry about it because we're going to make a change to it. So EFCore will create the update statement for us, and it'll write all the columns, not just the ones that have changed. All right, then finally, we'll come in here and we'll execute the update statement itself with the saved changes. All right, so finally, we've got our delete, which is what? It's a remove or it's a delete operation. So this is the fourth of our CRUD operations right here. All right. And again, you'll notice we have to come in and find the employee with the right ID. We want to make sure if we're going to delete an employee, it is the correct employee. All right, so basically we're saying that, you know, I guess it's possible it's null, but if it's this, do this, or if it's this, do this, etc. So go through the correct table. So we want to search each table using the find operator until it hits the associated primary key. All right, the null coalescing operator, that's that question mark, it moves to the next table. If it's gone through the hourly employees table and it doesn't find it, then it goes through the piece worker employees, etc. All right, if it doesn't find it at all, it's going to throw an exception and say that it wasn't found. Otherwise, it marks the entity for deletion from its own table, and from the employees table. And then the save changes actually executes the delete statement. All right, so this right here, change this, because what this is here these are what are referred to as helper methods. All right, and by writing it like this, it makes it a little easier where we can create employee objects without having to use new all the time in order to do this. Now, I didn't do this, but I am going to make a couple changes in here now. Why? Because I want you to be able to see everything. Every employee has a first name and a last name. I think we know that. All right, so we're returning their first name, last name, hours worked, and hourly rate. That's for every hourly employee. Whoops. Try that again. Every piece worker employee has a first name, a last name. We've talked about these already. Oopsie. A number of pieces that they made, and a price per piece. Every commission employee has got a first name, a last name, a sales amount, and a commission percentage. And all we're doing is we're returning the employee. We've already set up their first name and last name, and then we set the things that are unique to a piece worker, an hourly worker, a commission worker, or a salaried worker. Salaried is a little unique because the only one field that it has is weekly salary. And that's everything in there. So what is left to go over here? Say this again. What is left to go over here will be both the startup form and the employee manager form. That's what's left. Now I'm going to check my time. And I'm at 25 minutes, 26 by the time I quit talking here. So when I come back, I'm going to go over the startup form. All right, that shouldn't take that long, but afterwards, I'm going to start at least going over the employee manager form. Then we're going to see if we can run this and get it to work. If that happens, and hopefully it will, then we will begin the process of converting this entire application to an ASP.NET app. So I'll see you shortly. Thanks.